Welcome to the Evolve Podcast, a podcast about disrupting your life to spark new evolution. Evolve your body, evolve your mind, evolve your soul, and evolve your tribe. And now it's time to disrupt. And we're live. Folks, normally joining me from Oberlin, Ohio, the most interesting man that I know, W. Miles Riley, has the night off. He's got a prior commitment, but in the mountains of Utah, I am Steve Cutler, and we want to welcome you to this episode of the Evolve Podcast. We are very, very fortunate today to be joined by Brian Sanders. Now, Brian Sanders is a filmmaker behind the Food Lies documentary. He's a host of a top 5 nutrition podcast, Peak Human, and he's an international speaker. Brian graduated from UCLA with a degree in mechanical engineering. He works as a health coach at Evolve Healthcare, great name, Brian, and co-founded the health education company Sapien. He also works to spread the awareness of regenerative agriculture and increase access to well-raised animal products through his company, Nose to Tell. And Brian, as we were talking about before we started the recording here, I didn't realize that I was a big fan of yours about 2 years ago when I first saw this video on YouTube. As I said, one of the few videos that I've ever saved on YouTube, Game Changers Debunked. But I've been following your Instagram account for some time, and you do a great job of communicating this really challenging message out there of what real food and real health is, but you do it in an entertaining way. So I've got to tell you, I'm confident this is going to be one of the most important podcast episodes that we can do because it's really a powerful message. And our listeners need to hear the concept so that they can break through the lies that are out there. So I'd like to start a little bit with your story. Tell our listeners about you and what got you to the point that you're at today.
Yeah, well, never thought I'd be here. Never thought I'd get into the health world. I kind of didn't care about health growing up, but I was just always playing sports, grew up in Hawaii, went to mechanical engineering school, and was going about my life and kind of getting away with it in my 20s. And then everything caught up to me. So around the age of 30, I lost both my parents to chronic disease. And I myself was getting a dad bod and just kind of not doing well. And so when I lost them, it woke me up, obviously, to not have the same thing happen to me. Because the crazy part was we were doing all the right things. So we were just following the food pyramid. We weren't going out to eat. We were like limiting junk food. It was very much just home cooked meals, pasta, bread, low fat dressing, skim milk, lean chicken breast. It was the whole thing. It was exact food pyramid. And it wasn't working. It didn't work for them. They just slowly got chronic disease. And looking back, I realized they had pre-diabetes and didn't know it. And actually, the CDC even says on their own website, 9 out of 10 people who have pre-diabetes don't know it. It's crazy.
Wow.
They do, and they just like proclaim this on their website, and they're not doing anything about it because doctors aren't even trained to find it. They just know, okay, once the A1C gets up to 5.7, now you have diabetes, and no one even cares if it's a 5.6. And there's all these signs of prediabetes that I can just see just looking around at people, whether it be like just having that beer belly, that dad bod, that belly is basically a sign of inflammation and prediabetes. And even things like skin tags, or, I just remember my dad having skin tags and there's just a bunch of things. So I now know that they had it undiagnosed, doing all the right things, not working. And this is what's going on times 300 million people in the US. And these days, usually before it was 12% of Americans were metabolically healthy. 88% were unhealthy. Now there's a newer study that says only 7% are healthy. And
when
I
did
think
that one come out?
3%.
Yeah, I was going to say post-pandemic, it's got to be even lower than that would be my guess, because it's just amazing what has happened post-pandemic with people. The obesity rates have risen sharply even in the last 2 years. It's shocking what's happened.
It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. It's all crazy. The messaging is all wrong. I don't really watch Bill Maher, but he did some great rants on this. He's like, hey, we know that this is a problem, that 84% of people, that go to the hospital are overweight or obese, or, all these stats on how bad it was. And he's like, where was the government telling people to exercise or eat better or anything? Even if it was bad info, at least they should have been saying something, and they didn't. And he was just calling them out like every few months. It was crazy that this stuff is going on, and people are just getting worse and worse when this is the time when we should be waking up to get healthier.
Well, you think about what's going on in our society, and the mechanism of health, the symbol of health now is that you wear a mask. You could be 300 pounds and put a mask on. And that's the symbol that we're putting out there, rather than people that are lean and fit. In fact, it's amazing to me at how, even in social media, how many people are pushing this idea of that the dad bod is great. The dad bod, you're great the way you are. And this idea that you can, quote, be healthy at any age.
Any size.
God, yeah, or any size. Thank you. I'm sorry. Yeah. Healthy at any size. Talk about that. I know you've done a lot of research in this. What is going on? Why are we pushing this idea that we can be metabolically unhealthy, that we can have no flexibility, no strength, we can constantly have pre-diabetes, diabetes, and yet somehow we're calling that healthy? What's happening?
Well, it's a new culture. I think it's kind of the way that the culture is going, where everyone gets a participation award and everyone is special. And
it's a great way to describe it,
right? Like, people have written books about it. I haven't read all this. Is like kind of goes outside my kind of forte into the health, but I always see this kind of thing happen, right? It's like The Coddling of the American Mind, I think, is a book, but it's kind of just like,
oh yeah,
right? It's this thing that everyone's special and everyone's amazing. And I guess it's a decent thing, because we want to have people to have high self-esteem, and that helps to have positive attitudes and, all that type of thing.
Sure.
But they jumped the shark, it's like it's gone way too far. So now that's, oh, well, everyone's great. Everyone's healthy. They have Sports Illustrated swimsuit models that are over 400 pounds, like just morbidly obese. They're one that said, this is healthy. It said, this is healthy. It wasn't just like, hey, let's represent people who are large. They weren't just saying that,
right?
Which is like, oh, let's be inclusive, which is another thing. That's okay, fine, be inclusive. But they said, this is healthy,
right? Which
is factually wrong. And so, yeah, we're putting a little bit of this in the film because we can't go down this route. It's only getting worse. And it's scientifically proven that as you carry more fat, you die sooner. It's actually a U-shaped curve. It's a J-shaped curve. So if you're really underweight, you have an increased mortality, right? You can die sooner. This is the stats that they use. Sooner, years life lost. So that's probably people who are really old, emaciated. You know what I mean? Obviously, you don't want to be skin and bones, and there could be reverse correlation too, where someone who's already very sick and underweight. But then you have this normal weight where you have your good zone, and then it sharply goes up, linearly up to, as the more weight you carry, the sooner you die. This is all over the literature. I looked up all these different studies. It's not even questions. Yet in the mainstream media, which doesn't care about the science, I guess, they can just say whatever they want.
Yeah, they make these declarative statements that go in the face of what actual science is. Brian, I want to get to the food lies here in just a second, but let's kick it back a little bit. Mom and dad got sick. Dad had cancer, is that right? And mom Alzheimer's. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so these are chronic diseases. In fact, I read many scientists now believe that they are kind of looking down this path of Alzheimer's, dementia, as potentially what they're calling type 3 diabetes, and something that could be potentially preventable with the right lifestyle. So mom and dad get sick. You start digging into this. Fast forward to, what was the first project that you started working on? Was Game Changers Debunked the first one that you put out, or how did you start not only learning this for yourself, but creating content to help other people learn it?
Yeah, well, it started 9 years ago. So I'm 39. So it was around 30. And I just read Mark Sisson's book, actually, Primal Blueprint. People know of Mark Sisson. He's amazing. He's 68 now. He's shredded. He's the healthiest person ever. He's amazing. I played Ultimate Frisbee with him after we filmed his interview, and he was running around with 20-year-olds, outrunning them. He's amazing. He's amazing. So big
That's
inspiration.
awesome.
So I started, cutting out grains, added sugars, vegetable oils 9 years ago, and changed my life. It was so simple. I was already eating whole foods. I was already cooking for myself, right? I was never just like going to McDonald's all the time or something. And all I had to do is cut out bread and pasta and tortillas, and my whole life changed. And I lost like 20 pounds of fat and like gained like 20 pounds of muscle, something like that.
That's
I don't know.
amazing.
My whole body composition just changed. It just like tightened up and just became human again. My joint pain went away. I had like chronic overuse injuries from the computer went away. Knee pain went away. Acid reflux went away. Even my allergies went away. I had allergies. And now if I eat bread, if I'm, go to a restaurant, have a charcuterie board, eat some bread with the meats, boom, allergies the next morning. It's amazing. And
Yeah.
not like I have celiac or anything. I've never had a problem. I could eat bread and it doesn't really affect me. It just affects me in those small ways that people don't realize, like you have allergies. And so really it's just these inflammatory foods people don't understand, because everyone is in this malaise of just inflammation and like chronic fatigue and brain fog and all these things, and they don't even know it, right? And then until you pop out of the matrix, like so many of us have, then you're like, oh man, I was not doing well. And so people don't know that a lot of the stuff the problems they have are just due to what they're eating, but they just think that this is how you eat and there's no other way. And they just never give it a rest, and they just go along with their life, and it gets worse and worse.
I can really resonate with what you're talking about, because much like you, I wasn't living this extremely unhealthy McDonald's, on the way to work and on the way home type of life. I would cook my food, or my wife is making food at night. We'd making dinner. And for the longest time, within health and fitness as a trainer and a coach, but yet at a certain point, my body wasn't changing. And it wasn't until I said, well, wait a minute, I've tried everything that's out there. I've tried all of the different things that, the American Heart Association, American Dietetic Association, that everybody talks about, except the only thing I haven't tried is getting rid of all of these grains, getting rid of all that kind of stuff, trying out ketogenic, trying out carnivore, trying out some of these things where I'm just getting rid of some of this other stuff. Had a friend of mine get me introduced to, now I'm going to blank on her name, Big Fat Surprise.
Oh, Nina Teicholz. Yeah.
Nina Teicholz's book. And jaw dropping. Just to, I listened to it on Audible when I would go out for my hikes in the summertime, finished it in a short period of time, and completely transformed my life. I'm 46 years old right now, and I maintain low single digit body fat, and I feel better than I have. I can't even remember when. Like you, I wasn't the McDonald's guy. I was the guy that was eating quote unquote healthy. I was living a quote unquote healthy life. It's amazing what happens when you make some of these shifts when we're in our space. But for people who are eating the standard American diet, I think it makes even more of an impact. When you made that change, obviously you talked about some of these things that happen from an anti-inflammatory standpoint. What were some of the other changes that you noticed in your body? Energy change, weight loss, what else?
Yeah. Well, actually, I should finish my story. I realized I just got off track with explaining how I got here.
Yeah.
So that changed.
Sorry.
Oh, completely. Yeah. Didn't have that crash at 2 p.m. Everyone's got that like after lunch nap and lull and they feel terrible. Got rid of that. It's just a million things. It's just like your whole life changes. It's hard to even quantify or like talk about the specifics. It's kind of like you just pulled off the curtain to like the real world, and or like finally got glasses. You had the fuzzy vision the whole time, and then you got glasses, like, oh, this is the world. So that happened for
Great
me.
description.
So people around me were doing it. I was just seeing so much success around me. It was actually when I saw What the Health 6 years ago. So that was a vegan film that came out 6 years ago. I saw it in the summer. I remember summer 6 years ago. And it was everything the opposite of what I just did to fix myself and what I saw around me, all the people around me healing themselves. And I grew up making films. I was just one of those kids with a camera in my hand. I got like the first camcorder back in like 1999 that, had a little screen on it.
Very cool.
I'm running around there making films with my brother and my cousin. Then I took all the classes in high school with my buddy who's back in Hawaii. He ended up going to film school, right? So he became a professional director, editor. He's just amazing. We looped back in and started making this film together. So what happened was 6 years ago, saw What the Hell. I was like, hey, I need to do something about this. I have some film background. I could make a documentary. Called up Nina Teicholz. Honestly, the second person I talked to Dr. Ted Naiman. He's another great guy in the space. He's great. Ted Naiman, Nina Teicholz got on the horn with I just made a website. I'm like, hey, I'm making this film. Can you be in it? And they're like, absolutely.
That's awesome.
It kept rolling from there. Kept rolling, just kept doing interviews, trying to piece together a budget, just small projects. Started doing some Instagram just to try to raise awareness for my Indiegogo campaign, which is still live, by the way. Please go check it out, foodlives.org. You can link to the Indiegogo campaign. That's how we're making this film still. We don't get paid. Me and Jay, the guy in Hawaii, do not get paid. It's all to go to the professional graphics, motion graphics. We do high-end motion graphics. We're doing custom soundtrack. We're doing all the good things. So those are the only guys getting paid. And started making this just little by little, like we got a little more money. We made another interview, started my podcast along the way, right? I was interviewing all these amazing people. So I'm like, hey, come on my podcast while we're at it. And it just kept rolling from there.
That's awesome. So the documentary comes out, you're noticing these changes, you're meeting with some of the most fascinating people in the space. Talk about, as you started to put out some of this content, what was the reception of it? How did people respond once you started to, drop some of these, I guess the shows, the episodes, the movies, and then some of your other content that you're putting out? What's the initial reception?
Well, initial reception was crickets, because I was some random dude who had 0 followers and 0 anything. And so, but then comes the haters, right? Then you get the vegan haters. Then you get actually the guys that like the Lane Nortons, who I might do another podcast with. I don't know if you know who that is. He's one of these guys that's count your macros, count your calories. And I just don't agree with that stuff. He's like, everything's good, just count it. I'm like, so you're just saying eat less junk food and you'll be healthy? And he's like, yeah. So anyway, so I have all these arguments with people over the years, and I don't know. It's been great. Actually, it's been really helpful to get feedback from the audience, and I learn a lot, and I've honed in my message. I'm glad the film has taken 6 years, because I thought I knew everything back then. You think you know it all. And then a few years later, you're like, oh man, I learned so much more since then. And so just doing all this content along the way has helped hone the message in, help it be more accurate, more bulletproof. I'll give Lane Norton credit that I wanted to make a film that he couldn't debunk. I kind of have this in the back of my mind. It's like, how could it, because he's trying to be like Mr. Science, Mr. Bulletproof, like I'm gonna debunk everything. Like, I think I could do that, so that I could not only will Sean Baker, Paul Saladino, like the carnivore crowd will like it, even Lane Norton's gonna like it, the keto people will like it, the paleo people will like it, the Whole Foods people. These are all my people. These are like, I joke around that I'm in camp, no camp, which kind of is a camp in itself, really. But the irony's not lost on me, because I know it is. I'm in my own camp of thinking that I'm so unbiased, and that I'm in no camp. Of course, I am biased in some ways, but over the years, I've learned more about all the different diets that can work and all the different patterns, really, that can work, and that the diet doesn't just need to be a name. So many diets, people are just like, oh, well, that's keto, and so I have to do this. And they don't even know why they're doing it. They're just like, carbs are bad. So I just, I just am keto now. And they just follow rules blindly. But then they could end up just eating packaged keto foods and not being healthy at all.
Yeah.
So kind
Yeah.
of the main story here is I went on a journey of learning and just refining my message and talking to more and more people and looking at groups that do the opposite yet are healthy. I'm like, okay, well, what about the Okinawans or something? People like to point to them because they live a long time, right? And they're in a blue zone. Like, okay, what's up with these blue zones? And then you find out more that it's not really so much about their diet. It's the like 100 other lifestyle factors that they do correctly.
Yeah.
Right? It's a community,
Right.
and they're outside working, and they're staying active, and they have strong bonds and sense of purpose, and you know what I mean? There's a million things. They don't drink too much. They don't smoke, like all these things. And then they eat a whole foods diet, and it's just like, okay, well, the guy, Dan Buettner, went around and like purposely looked for like people he was trying to basically make a plant-based book we call the Blue Zones that was trying to prove this point. So he's very selective and biased and cherry picking. But what it turns out is,
Well, not only that, but in that book, as you go back and read more about it, the dietary recommendations that he makes in there are not even the same as what people in those particular blue zones eat, right? It's not
exactly,
because people don't in those blue zones, they don't eat the way he recommends that they eat, right? It's just not true. It's not factual.
Well, yes. So there's a woman named Mary Ruddick who I interviewed a couple times, who's my good friend, who took me to Africa last year, which we can talk about. We spent time with the Hadza, the Maasai, some other tribal groups. She's been to a lot of the blue zones to debunk them. Everywhere she goes, they're just covered in meat and fat. The Ikaria is one of them. She spent a long time in Ikaria. They're just eating lamb and goat and fat and organs and dairy and cheese. And Dan Buettner was trying to play them up as a plant-based place. Went to Costa Rica. I went to Costa Rica with her. They're living off of eggs and pork and fat and pork fat, and they save it, and yogurt, and they have a cow, they're getting dairy from it each day. Like, it is bogus. The Okinawans. So yeah, I was gonna say the Okinawans, they regard pork as a longevity food. Like, yes, they didn't have a lot of beef because they're on an island. They didn't have beef, but pork was considered a longevity food. They ate tons of seafood, and they had, some sweet potatoes and some vegetables. Great. That's fine. That's whole foods. Like, who cares? Like, you can, what I've found is, like, really, you can have any combination of whole foods. As long as you have some substantial key nutrients from animal foods, you can be fine. Right? Like, if you're talking about the Okinawan diet, okay, eating this is just what they had available. They had a bunch of sweet potatoes, vegetables, seafood, pork. Great. Amazing. Go for it. You know what I mean? Like that's fine. You're getting tons of key nutrients from fish and pork and protein. And so, yeah.
So there's a couple of things that you say. I loved your tweet today, by the way. I don't know if you tweeted it today, but I saw it on your Instagram today. Where you said, "What are my dietary restrictions? I don't eat foods that the mainstream thinks are healthy: raw, green, veg, grains, beans, seeds, vegetable oil, lean chicken." I love that. That actually made me laugh out loud because it's so common. I was overhearing a conversation the other day between people, and they were talking about these, quote, superfoods, which is another pet peeve of mine. Talk a little bit about what are some of the main things that you hear that you have found over the years are just complete garbage, complete lies.
Well, yeah, that kind of encapsulates a lot of them. That's funny because I'm wearing a shirt that says beef liver is the new kale. Beef liver is the new kale. Like, people regard, kale as a superfood. I don't think there's anything super about it. Like, beef liver, if we're going to use the word superfood, was probably the only one, because it actually is one of the most nutrient dense things you could eat on the planet. So
very nutrient dense. Yeah.
So and then I did tweet that today, and then this follow-up tweet was, I eat I mostly eat what everyone thinks are unhealthy. I eat red meat, butter, eggs, cheese, sausage, bacon, honey. Like, those are just like kind of like 6 things I could think of that people think are unhealthy. Even the honey, that's kind of a curveball to some. And I've come around on honey and fruit as like being great and healthy. And no one thinks fruit is unhealthy, I guess, except for keto people. But yeah, I just kind of do the opposite of what the mainstream recommendations are. It's kind of hard to list all the food lies because it's kind of just everything they say is a lie. I kind of listed in that tweet that you read, though, that's the food pyramid, kind of, right? They want you to eat all the grains and the bread and the pasta. Then they want all the beans and legumes and vegetables and fruit, fine. And then, the meat's way up at the top, and that meat should be fish and lean chicken. I have no problem with fish, but I have a problem like with lean chicken. That, I mean, if you're just trying to get some protein, then yeah, I mean, it's okay. But it's kind of like the least nutrient dense meat. And it also is raised the most poorly, right? Like if you get most standard pork and chicken is just raised in a gigantic warehouse with 1 million of the animals in one place. At least cows are out on the pasture for the first 2/3 of their life. People think the vegans will have you believe that they're just in a feedlot their entire life and they're like in some cage or something. That's not how it works. The first 2/3 of their life, they're in a cow-calf operation. It's a completely different operation, which they're with their mother, they're like out on the grass. And then the last 1/3 of their life, they would go to a feedlot and, they're on mud and it's not great, but it's not like they're in a cage. But that's sort of a different story. If we wanted to get in the environmental side, that's a whole nother thing we get into in the film. But basically, I guess I'll try to answer your question instead of going on tangents. The main food, the main.
I love the tangents, so you keep going.
I love it. I try to always weave it into the question, but the main food lies, man. The base, the food pyramid is upside down. I think that's a common thing. People realize it's just the grains, these empty foods. It's just empty calories, right there. Okay, I'm going to have to go back a little bit. I love it. We're going back in history, back into the 1950s when we started having heart disease and we didn't know what was going on and we didn't have all the science back then. And, President Eisenhower had a heart attack. This is also when everyone was smoking like in their baby's crib and like in the shower and in the elevator and in their car.
Nonstop, like chain smoking
like,
shit.
In bed, they're smoking, like they're like taking a shower, they're a bath and they're smoking. So they're doing all the smoking. They got all the Crisco and all the fake margarines and stuff in their diet. And then they have some heart disease. And these geniuses decide to blame it on meat and fat. And that's a whole long story with Ansel Keys, and people may know the 7-country study and all this stuff. Then we end up with the bogus food pyramid. All the food industry just takes off. They're like, oh, okay, well, fat's bad. All right, great. We're just going to put in a whole bunch of cheap grains and sugar and try to make packaged foods and sell them at a huge profit margin because they're now low fat and healthy. And so part of why this all started was because we had all these cheap grains and crops, right? We had the US with 1 million acres of corn, wheat, and soy. And part of the story that I found making the film is they actually wanted to fit a budget. So the dietary guidelines, it wasn't the food pyramid yet, was supposed to be pretty decent. It was supposed to be like, get your meat, get your milk, get your fruits and vegetables, and, like a little bit of bread, because that's just what they had. And it was fine back then. It wasn't soaked in glyphosate. And, there wasn't like Monsanto bread. And it was okay. And then they're like, wait a second.
I like how you just said that, Monsanto bread. Would you like some Monsanto with your bread? Please give me all the chemicals. Yes.
Feed me. I want it.
Oh, that's great.
Dripping with chemicals. No, so they realized, they're like, wait, we have to pay for this. The government is like, hey, we got the military, we got the nursing homes, we got the schools, we got the food stamps program. If we make these dietary guidelines with the what?
The prisons and the hospitals. Exactly. It's the same guidelines for prisons and hospitals.
All
it's the
stuff,
same
prisons,
thing.
Hospital food stamp program, all this stuff. They're like, fresh meat, fresh eggs, fresh milk, fresh vegetables, fruits. That's expensive. What we got millions of acres of corn, wheat, and soy, and there's like lobbyists, and there's like some funny business going on. All of a sudden, the dietary guidelines come back, 7 to 11 servings of grain. And it's like things got pushed around And guess who benefits? I mean, it's just, I don't even know if it's the government just benefits from not having to pay for all those expensive food programs, or if it's the company, the companies that benefit from it, and the subsidies. Like, it's just this big circle of sort of money flying around into everyone's pockets, but the everyday person. So the everyday
Yeah.
person's health is screwed, and the everyday person's wallet is screwed. And that's just actually the story of the whole world in the last 100 years.
Well, and actually, I think it's a story of the world through history that there has been governmental and religious impact on our food throughout history. There's a great, well, it actually is one of the great courses on Audible, but it's a 20 some odd hour course on food and culture and history and religion, how it's all tied together. And they didn't even cover very much relative to the U.S. and how we've created the nutrition habits that we have. But you go back through time, and all food choices have some sort of link to some sort of religious or cultural link or cultural factor to it. Kellogg, for instance, Kellogg's made I don't know how much money off of selling cereals. And what a lot of people don't know is that the Kellogg company, Kellogg, was promoted by the Seventh-day Adventists as this guy who could get in and lobby for grains. And it was all put out there. The Seventh-day Adventists put this propaganda out that you should eat grains and get off of meat, because at one point they observed people who were mentally ill were sitting in a room masturbating, and they linked it to eating meat. So they said, well, that's causative, right? Because you're eating meat, you're masturbating. And so the Seventh-day Adventists said, we got to eradicate the world from eating meat, because Jesus will return when the world stops eating meat. And so they have this entire agenda around getting people to stop eating meat, because they think that's when the second coming of Christ is. And it's fascinating to me when you're talking about Ansel Keys, and you're talking about the food pyramid, you're talking about the whether it was a budgetary decision or whatever it was, but this is where our guidelines came from, and they are the same across the board. I love how you kind of made a jab at Lane Norton. The one thing I do like about Lane Norton is that he'll bring up some stuff and it's okay, well, let's look at this. I don't always agree with the stuff that he does to rebut what people are saying, but I do like the fact that he's trying to have some sort of maybe alternative view. Let's just put it at that. Coming back to your story, you started to create some of this stuff and you were putting it out there. Silence for a while, haters for a little bit. How is it being received right now? I mean, it looks like you've got good engagement on the platforms that I see you on. So you're obviously hitting a chord with certain people. What's the response?
Oh, now it's amazing. I've found my people, my Instagram. I don't know if you're on Instagram, but that's mainly where I'm at. And I have a good community there, and it's going awesome. And it's great is that people even come to my aid. Like they're always, there'll always be some vegan that sneaks into the comment section, or someone kind of trying to cause trouble.
The angry vegan.
Yeah. And I don't even have to do anything. I don't have to try to respond, because 5 people will help me. And I've just cultivated this amazing community just around just eating whole foods, like being thoughtful about our ancestral roots and our heritage. And it's actually fantastic. I cannot complain one bit. And I haven't had, I had a little bit of problems with censorship during COVID, because I was kind of speaking out a little too much, and YouTube took down my video and I got a strike. I have warnings on all platforms. On Instagram, I have warnings. It says like your account is
That's
at
a
risk.
sign of a great page. Yeah, that's a sign of a great page.
But no, I have a few 100,000 people behind me now on the different platforms. So Twitter's actually my smallest platform, but things are, it's been amazing. And it's actually even come to life in real life. I'm here in Austin and we're getting together in real life. I call it the Sapien Center, where it's just people who believe in this. It's people like you. If you were around here, you would be there. It's people who just want to
for sure.
live, be outdoors, lift weights, eat good food, have a positive attitude, connect with their community. all that. And I've got hundreds of people in Austin Austin's kind of like a lightning rod for these people, right? In the past 2 years, there's been a mass exodus from California. I was stuck in California for way too long. And yeah, man, it's been amazing. The community is just fantastic.
That's awesome. And I want to put a plug in here for what you were talking about before. So foodlies.org is where people would go, and then they can come to this Indiegogo page and donate to help you to finish the Food Lies documentary. You guys are working hard on it. Tell our listeners about this. It's going to be a 6-part series. Is that right?
Yeah, it turned into a 6-part series because we have so much great information. We couldn't fit it all. It would have been a 3-hour movie, and no one's going to watch a 3-hour movie. And we're trying to get on Netflix. We have some great distribution companies that are wanting to represent us and get it worldwide. And Netflix would be a major strategy. And, Netflix, it's all about those bite-sized series. You get the series, you get like the 30-minute episodes, 25-minute episodes, something like that. So yeah, this is something that I do all day, every day. I've been staying up till 11 p.m. working most nights lately. I'll probably jump back on the old scripts and all this work for the film as soon as we get off. But we're really trying to tell this whole story that we've been getting into. I mean, we've kind of just scratched the surface today, but we're trying to get pretty much everything that I've ever learned in the past 9 years. And probably all the stuff you've learned and however long you've been doing this and all of your podcast guests, imagine trying to get that into one package, right? Let's get this into an audio visual thesis, right? It's like, how do you best change someone's mind? I encountered this a lot because I talked to so many people about this, the Uber drivers, the person on the airplane, the sort of angry plant-based person that you're at a dinner party and they're like, why are you eating that? Like, what is up? Why are you eating so much meat? And then you get in these discussions with them. How could, like, the best thing you can do, I say, is to show them a audio, like a Netflix series that's 3 hours long, right? Because how else are they going to get all this information? They're not going to listen to 100 hours of podcasts, go to like 100 lectures, read 100 books. You know what I mean? There's so much that we've done to kind of immerse ourselves into this. And so for the everyday person, they're not going to do that. So I just have to give them this series. And that's why it's taking so long. It's kind of like, have you heard the phrase, I would have written a shorter letter, but I didn't have the time?
Yes. Yeah.
It's such a good one because, man, I could have thrown something out, years ago and it would have been mediocre. But I'm sitting here till 11 p.m. on my computer. At least I got my red light or my blue light blocker on my computer. But, I'm up here, probably ruining my circadian rhythm here, trying to do this because every word matters. It's like, how do we tell the entire story from human evolution all the way to regenerative ag? And that's what we do. We start with like how we do require animal foods, like why we changed the way. We're not chimps. Like, we don't have like this giant digestive system that ferments plants matter. Like, we can't get nutrition from cellulose. We're not like a cow with 4 stomachs. And yet the vegans, they use that in the Game Changers film. There's twice they said the strong, like, I look at this ox and this, I want to be strong like ox, so I will eat plants, or whatever the hell that guy said. Right. And they did another one with like a rhino or something. The strongest animal is a rhino and it's eating grass or something. It's just like absurd. So we're trying to go back and say, like, how did our gut systems change and why we require nutrient dense animal foods? And that's how we became human. And that's what our bodies thrive on. And yeah, sure, we can survive on just about anything, right? That, like, this kind of plant-based diet, this food pyramid diet, is kind of just like a survival diet. It's kind of what governments always do back into the Egyptian days. The Egyptians are famous for eating all these grains, and everyone's like, oh, what's wrong with grains? The Egyptians ate grains. I'm like, yeah, the pharaohs, like they had 1 million slaves building pyramids, and they had to feed them with the cheapest possible food. And that's just basically empty calories that like can barely keep someone alive. So actually, that's a problem with nutrition. is that so many people can eat all sorts of different diets and they don't die, right? Or they eat any kind of diet and they're like, well, I'm fine. And then, they turn 40, they turn 50, and then they're on 3 medications, 5 medications. They get the dad bod, they become obese. You know what I mean? It's just the slowest process. So no one really gets it, right? No one it's so hard to convince someone to do this unless you've seen the results that you and I have seen.
And it is fascinating when you get those results, you never want to give them up. I had a friend that he passed away in his early 80s. He unfortunately contracted cancer, but he had lived a very, very healthy life and was very competitive his entire life in multiple things. He was still snowboarding when he was in his late 70s. And he lived this lifestyle. He ate a lot of fresh meat, and, was not the typical healthy American diet type of thing. Fit, strong, lifted weights every day. I mean, out snowboarding. He was showing me a video one day. We're sitting on the bike at the gym because I had sustained an ankle injury and he had just come out of having surgery for cancer. And so we're sitting on the bike and I said, look at us, man. We're pretty pathetic right now. So he's showing me a video of snowboarding down this massive mountain in the middle of Patagonia. And he looks at that and he says, you see that guy right there? That's my buddy, Laird Hamilton. You see the one behind him? That's me. You see all those other motherfuckers up there? They're in their 20s and I'm beating them all.
Wow.
And he just, that was his life. And he could do that for almost till the day he died. And like I said, unfortunately passed away from cancer, which I think can get many people, especially later in life. And that's the life I want to live. My kids, my wife and I, we go out and we play pickleball for hours. We go on hikes, we paddleboard, we wakeboard, all of the stuff. And we don't have to sit on the sidelines. I don't want to do that, right? But far too many people are sitting on the sidelines. And I think what's cool about what you're teaching people is that they don't have to sit on the sidelines. You present this concept that I'm a huge fan of, partially because I've been in that dogmatic approach before of this particular diet. Years ago, I got trained by some bodybuilders, and so it was a bodybuilding diet, the clean eating diet, the whatever, right? And then I tried keto, and then I tried carnivore, and I tried veganism for 3 months. Vegetarianism for 3 months. This was years and years ago. I had a vegan friend. And then I tried veganism for 2 weeks and I wanted to kill myself. And I say that jokingly, but also I was so depressed. I genuinely, that was the only time in my life that I can honestly say, well, I think I had some suicidal thoughts at that point. I was like, this is not good. As soon as I started eating meat again, I felt 1,000,000 times better. So you promote this idea of really not classifying a particular diet, but eating a certain way. Talk about why that's the message for you.
Yeah, I call it the Sapien diet. If we're going to call it a diet, it's Sapien, or the Sapien framework. It's just what I think is how humans should live. And it could be considered a diet and lifestyle because humans should be outside and be getting sun and be getting access to nature and exercise and good sleep and all the other things. But to me, you need to have kind of a bulletproof diet, or your ideas have to be bulletproof, because I just don't want to be debunked, right? I just think it's so stupid that people get caught in these little dietary camps, but then you can easily debunk them, right? Because so many people that say, this is how it is, this is the best way to go, keto's the way, sugar is going to kill you, if you eat fruit you're going to die, honey's going to kill you, all this type of stuff. And they get into these boxes, but you're like, well, wait a second. What about this population? What about the Okinawans? Or, what about that Kitavan? There's the Sukasente, the Tokulawans. There's all these people around the world that they're eating high starch diets, but they're eating tons of really nutrient dense animal foods and seafood, and they're eating high starch diets and they're totally fine. And now there's this new community called the pro-metabolic community. And they go by different names, bioenergetic, pro-metabolic. It's a little bit like what Saladino's doing now, where he's eating meat and fruit. Right. And so I got into the science of that and how does that work? And it's so interesting because it works great and people can be super healthy and the people have been doing it for years. And then I'm like, hey, that checks out because there's all these populations that are basically doing that type of diet and they've been healthy and they're just eating natural foods. So kind of, my journey that I've said before was, going, checking things out with all of history, with all of people, who are living like natively and eating traditional diets, and what people, around town, around the US that are doing stuff like this, and checking it out with the literature, and you've got to make all these checks for things to come to the kind of unifying theory. I guess I like that sort of Einstein thing. Like he was after the unifying, like the theory of everything, and E equals MC squared is kind of that, I guess. But it's like my unifying theory of nutrition is this Sapien framework, which is kind of what we've been talking about, which is you're eating whole foods, you're eating animal foods, and you're avoiding processed foods. Like that's like the ultimate simplest version of it. And then that can't really be debunked. It's like, if you're like, I don't get obsessed with calories or macros because I've seen so many people do well on either side of the spectrum on different macro ratios, as long as they're getting enough protein, they're getting enough nutrients, they're getting whole foods. I don't think, say, a bodybuilding diet is good because maybe it can work in the short term and you could do, you could just eat like lean chicken and broccoli and rice and you can get cut and shredded and all that, but that's not long-term health. So another component is long-term thinking, right? And so many diets are short-term thinking. What a juice fast is short-term thinking. I think the juice fast is the stupidest thing you could do. You're just chugging sugar. You're just like chugging sugar water.
I agree.
You're getting no protein. So mainly you're getting no protein. So people think they're losing weight. Guess what? You just lost muscle. You basically, you just lost muscle mass, fella. Like you think you're so good because the scale went down. Probably more than half of that was muscle, not fat. So, and they've done studies
and diarrhea too for a lot of the people. A lot of them are getting diarrhea from just doing that juice fast.
Yeah, but I mean, but they think it's good. They're like, oh, great, I looked good in my swimsuit on my vacation, and then they go back to now they're like fiending for sugar. They're starving. They're nutrient deprived. They're protein deprived, and then they just go back to even heavier than before. So short-term thinking is also a huge problem. That I think that's bodybuilding community, that's standard weight loss community, that's Jenny Craig, that's Weight Watchers, all the standard stuff is just short-term thinking. Health is about long-term. Health is about your buddy who's 80 doing the stuff that like Mark Sisson, that's long-term thinking. He's 68. He's doing all that stuff. He's out there doing like the paddle boarding. He's doing this hydrofoil board. He's doing all these things. And that's what I want to do. And what that means is full nutrients and full, like just it's like long-term thinking is about protein and nutrients basically. And it's kind of hard to like quantify nutrients or really feel the difference, but like nutrients is like the vitamins and minerals. And that's what comes from all the whole foods and mainly the animal foods. So I hope this is all making sense. I'm not being too like sort of high level here when I'm trying to like talk about this. I can get more concrete and tell you like the foods that I think are good, but it's eating animal foods and specific plant foods that don't have a lot of anti-nutrients, like the foods we listed, like grains and beans and seeds. Like these are foods that have a lot of anti-nutrients in them that block the nutrient absorption. And they're actually not very nutrient dense. They don't have a lot of nutrients per the energy they have, like per calorie. Like I'm very interested in nutrient density, was just like how much good stuff, protein, nutrients does it have per the extra calories, right? And so that makes sense, right? It's like what are empty calories foods? It's like bread and pasta and rice. It's just empty calories basically, and you're not getting a lot of nutrients. What's the opposite? Liver.
When we were kids. Yeah, these are the nutrient dense, right? When we were kids, we referred to a lot of those foods as junk foods, right? You're eating junk food if you're eating candy. But basically, you look at them, what are they? They're just not nutrient dense foods, right? Or they have like one or two things. They've got, obviously, they're not nutrient dense, meaning that they don't have a lot of micronutrients, but they're probably just super heavy, or they only have primarily one. Yeah, so they've got sugar in them, or maybe a little bit of fat in them. In a way, I've always said chicken is kind of a junk food just because you have primarily protein, and that's about it. There's not a lot of extra stuff in that. So
Hmm.
let's break it down. There's a couple of things I want to make sure that we cover for our listeners
Hmm.
so that they've got some practical things. You mentioned some of the nutrient dense foods, but then I also want you to touch on this idea of anti-nutrients and the things that are within plants, because far too many people have grown up thinking that vegetables are where they're at, and they don't understand that vegetables are designed to fight against humans eating them. They want to stay alive and propagate. So let's start with, what are some of the nutrient dense foods that you recommend people incorporate for health?
All right, nutrient dense foods, liver's number one, probably oysters number two, egg yolks
Mm,
or eggs number three. These are just powerhouses of nutrition. Uh, After that, you basically have any animal food that's in its whole form. Lean chicken is like, yeah, not very nutrient dense, but if you ate like a chicken leg from a good
mhm.
farm, pasture raised chicken leg, it has some fat, got some dark meat, you're going to get some vitamins in there.
Yep.
Uh,
Yep.
any seafood, basically any fish, meat, eggs, just crush the fish, the meat, the eggs, the fat, the bone marrow. I mean, if you're just drinking straight fat, that's not actually nutrient dense, but you can,
Sure.
you know what I mean? Like, but you can get the fat that comes along with it. From there, then you kind of get the sliding scale down to the most nutrient poor foods, which actually have the most anti-nutrients, which are these plant foods that, like you said, they want to protect themselves. So their only defense is to create these chemicals that are basically pesticides. They're creating natural pesticides so that bugs or predators don't eat them. And yeah, it's really weird that we have this concept of the plants are these magical things that just create health when they're actually something that we've had to highly breed and cultivate to not kill us. And humans for all of history
Yeah.
have gone to great lengths to detoxify plants. And this is part of the film. This is part of my journey learning, and people I interview like Dr. Bill Schindler. He travels around the world and studies how these cultures detoxify plants. They all have all these elaborate techniques they have to ferment and they soak. And in South America, he's down there, they're putting a
Mm,
potato underground for like a year so that it ferments
yeah.
and gets rid of all of these anti-nutrients in them. People pressure cook beans and gets out the lectins. You can ferment sauerkraut to get out all these anti-nutrients. There's so many ways. Like even bread, the traditional way to make bread was to use the old school heritage grains, totally different from the GMO Monsanto grains. And they would grind them fresh and then ferment them and, use the yeast, like there's natural forming yeast just in the environment, and they would collect it and make bread, and you ferment it for a couple days. And that actually does get rid of some of these anti-nutrients that block nutrient absorption. So not only are these anti-nutrients, there's a whole list of them. Actually, I found a great vegan site that listed all the anti-nutrients and what to be careful of. It's like phytates, phytic acid, oxalates,
Wow.
lectins. And they were just going through them and like, watch out for this. If you can't eat so much raw spinach, you're going to get tons of oxalates. So it's really great that it's from a vegan site. And they do studies
Way
on
to
this
go,
stuff.
vegan.
It's wild. Like people have this cognitive dissonance. They're
Yeah.
like, the plants are trying to kill us, but they're the healthiest things ever. So here's how to try to mitigate all the
Mhm.
damage. Oh, what I was going to say is not only do they block nutrient absorption, they mess with your gut too. And I think so much of
Yes.
disease
Yeah.
happens in the gut. I have this the paradigm of disease to me is like these like two just factors, and it's kind of like a Venn diagram. They overlap, and it's energy toxicity, which is basically eating too much energy, which is basically if you
Mm.
eat non-nutrient dense foods like just bread, you're getting a whole bunch of energy and not enough nutrients, so your body keeps eating it, and then you end up with too much energy. Then you have overstuffed fat cells, turns into insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, right? So that's energy toxicity, is overabundance of energy meaning fat or carbs or both. And that is half the problem. The other half of the problem is gut problems. Your food affects your body the most. It's like kilogram of food goes through your body every day. Of course, it's going to have effects.
Mhm.
People have IBD, IBS, Crohn's disease, SIBO, like so many gut problems. And it's because what they eat, all autoimmune issues, I think most of them are from gut problems. Depression, even gut problems. It's where
Yep.
most of your
Yep.
serotonin is made in your gut. Your gut. So it's like you have all these gut problems. You have all these energy toxicity problems, too much energy. So it's, I think all diseases, I can't say all, because there's also like, environmental toxins, there's lead, there's, you know what I mean? There's like radiation, there's like more problems out there. But other than that stuff, you have these two things. So it's either the gut problems, it's energy toxicity, which is type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance, or both, right? And that's all disease. And how do you get those? It's just from all the modern diet, modern foods, sugar, flour, oil stuffed into everything you eat. And so it attacks your gut. All these plant foods are attacking your gut. And then also the plant foods are blocking nutrient absorption. So, man, it's kind of just like, flipped my world around. And I think you've been on that same journey where you're like, wait a second, plant foods aren't these magical things. Like they're this supermarket, you go to Whole Foods market and, it's this cornucopia of colors of the rainbow that's all shipped in from around the world. That's not normal. We just think this is what health is, just because maybe there happens to be some people who are healthy who do 100 other lifestyle factors like the Blue Zone people, and then happen to eat a lot of stuff. But these are the people who are avoiding the junk food, not smoking, not drinking, exercising. Anyway, it's kind of just this whole new paradigm.
Well, it's an amazing paradigm that we have to start to adopt, because when you look at the some of the incidents of these diseases and these problems, and we haven't even touched on mental health. I mean, mental health. We talked a little bit about depression, but you think about anxiety and all of these other challenges that come in with today's society. But so much of that is linked to food. I mean, when I started to get rid of a lot of the grains and the tubers and those types of things from my diet, I had never experienced any type of anxiety or significant depression, excuse me, until I was into probably my 30s. But that was a time when I was eating what you would consider more of a standard American or even a clean diet, which again was junk food, because I'm eating the chicken breast and I'm eating the potato. That's junk food. There's not a lot of nutrients in there. And so I'm eating this, and then all of a sudden I start to feel anxiety. And what a lot of people don't realize, like you're talking about, that the health is in the gut. When you're taking care of the gut, your body fights off disease better, but there's also that superhighway between the gut and the brain called the vagus nerve, and it sends signals immediately between the brain and the gut. That's why we always call it our gut feel or our second brain, right? But if the gut isn't healthy, people are going to have all of these other issues from a mental health standpoint. So I love this idea of nutrient density, and I love the idea of being aware of these anti-nutrients. And that blows my mind that you found some of that on a vegan website.
Oh man, yeah, people should check out Dr.
That's
Georgia
so cool.
Ede. Yeah, it is. I got to share that more. So Dr. Georgia Ede, speaking of all the mental health stuff, she's a Harvard psychiatrist, and she talks all about this stuff. It's just so great coming from a female, especially because she's just seen through it all, and she's not going to give you this bogus message of like, eat your salads. She's just like, no, eat red meat. And she's even gotten
That's
carnivore
awesome.
herself to even help
Wow.
her own mental things, and she feels great. And she's just really great.
That's awesome. Well, Brian, I know we're coming up on our time here. I've just got a couple of last questions for you that we like to ask our guests as we wrap up an Evolve podcast. At Evolve, we're really trying to get people to make an evolution. I think we have, as a society, devolved in many areas. And I think you put it best at one point where you said that we are the smartest organism out there, right? We're Homo sapiens. We've evolved, and yet somehow we haven't figured out how to eat and how to live a life that helps us to continue to grow and evolve. Are there, so a couple of questions I've got for you. Are there specific habits, routines, or rituals that you use on a regular basis to continually evolve and progress?
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I very much have like a daily routine, and part of it, and a workout routine. I think, okay, I'll give three. One, having a dog is great because that gets me outside in the morning.
Cool.
Right? I'm doing a
You're going
walk.
for
I'm getting the
walks.
sun.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
Super healthy.
Morning and night, I'm getting the sun. Two, I'm eating. I like to eat twice a day, and part of my like routine is to just for efficiency, I also just think I like to eat till I'm full. And for me, that what works for me is eating till I'm full and then not eating. Zero snacks. I haven't had snacks in years. No snacks. I just think so many people have a problem with snacking, and it's never good. And it just always gets in the way. Unless you're like a bodybuilder and you're purposely snacking and you have a whole strategy, I think it always screws people. So I'm eating 2 meals a day of amazing, nutritious foods, animal-based, just cooking for myself. I love it. And 3 is my workout. This is part of my ritual. This really just helps me. I'm not going to be a bodybuilder anytime soon. I'll tell you that. I'm a pretty thin guy, but I stay lean, single digits, body fat. I've never really measured, but I can walk around with abs any day of the week. And it revolves around doing these super short, effective workouts. And shout out to Dr. Ted Naiman. You know, I just love his take too. It's like, I've developed my own workout. I'm trying to roll it out at the place I was talking about in Austin here. We have a little gym that it's drop sets to failure, and it's quick. It's 25 minutes. Like my maintenance, it's only twice a week. I get in there for 25 minutes twice a week. I actually just did it right before we got on air. I ran here. I actually got into the gym at 7:01. I started the workout at 7:02, and I got on this podcast at 7:30. So I went.
That's awesome.
So I finished my workout and got 4 blocks home up here, turned my lights on in my studio. But I could do it. Part of it is that it's because it's quick, it's effective, and it's not grueling for me. It's always going to happen. I've never missed at least 2 days a week. Like I kind of only do it 2 days a week now, but I don't know. I just want to let people know that they don't have to do an hour CrossFit 3 to 5 times a week. I don't even know what people think they have to do. People think they have to go on a treadmill for an hour. It's like, oh, I'm not going to work out. What is, that's a nightmare. I have to do a treadmill for an hour a day. Then I have to do the CrossFit for another hour the next day. And then it's just exhausting. I get it. No one wants to do that. I sprint once a week for like 20 minutes, and I can just do my 25-minute drop sets of failure. I do, if people know what drop sets are and going to failure are, it's a very effective way to train your muscles very quickly. And I've interviewed great protein muscle synthesis researchers like Dr. Stu Phillips and Dr. Keith Barr. And, they kind of confirm this. They're like, he's like, yeah, I blow into the weight room. I do 1 set on each muscle group and I leave.
Yeah. Well, the science is out there and has been for years. And if people don't know, what I would recommend is you got to learn from somebody who really knows and start to become educated on that. But I love those habits. Next question, Brian, as you've evolved over the years, and you talked about that this is a 9-year journey for you at this point, from starting in this nutrition and research to now. What's something that you used to believe that you no longer do?
I think the main thing is what I was kind of saying, that like carbs are the enemy. I didn't realize carbs were the enemy. It was the type of carbs I was eating, or it was like there was just way more to it. So people demonizing like entire foods without context. Like even, for the past, 60 years, people saying fat's the enemy. Well, you know what? They're accidentally right on half of it, because all the plant fats are the enemy. If you're eating all these seed oils and frying them up, that's terrible. But see, that's the nuance there. You can't just say fat's enemy. It certainly isn't, because animal fat, natural fat is amazing for you. And rancid seed oils that are in a fryer at McDonald's are completely terrible for you. So it's the same thing with carbs. It's like, you can eat some fruit, maybe even the potatoes. Like I wouldn't base my diet on potatoes, but if you have a little sweet potato once in a while after you work out, that's not going to screw you. It's just don't make, you know what I mean? It's like, this stuff's not going to kill you. You just need a lot more context. So that's kind of where I'm at. Is just don't get caught up in like, going hardcore, thinking that, just getting too far. I don't know, basically just being biased to one way of thinking. and not looking
Yeah,
at
peel
nuance.
the layers back and look at the nuances. I think life's very nuanced. Yeah, great answer there. Brian, final question for you. So, at Evolve, we believe that people evolve their lives by stacking one simple habit on top of another. Doesn't have to be hard, but it just has to be something that's consistent. What do you think the most important habit is that you would want our listeners to build on?
Cooking for yourself, not eating at restaurants. That is it, that the habit stacking, that progression, that for me took 9 years. I remember 9 years ago reading the book, and I'm like, oh man, but you always, but my pizza, my pasta, this is my, this is what I grew up on in Hawaii. You eat rice with everything. No, it takes a while though. It's like you have this slow progression of eating all this foods that you love, going to restaurants, doing prepared foods, or just relying on bread and pasta. And then over the years, you just chip away at it, and then you like want to go out to eat less and less. Now, if I haven't gone out to eat once, unless I was with, if someone's visiting, I'll go out to eat with them, right? I have no desire to go out to eat anymore, because I just know that the food's not as good. It's gonna be expensive, and they're gonna cook it in a bunch of weird stuff. So that is a slow progression.
You feel like, you feel horrible afterwards.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not worth it. But people think I'm just some maniac. I don't know if people listening might think I'm a maniac, but I'm like, this is not me being restrictive. It's not like I'm sitting here, man, I wish I could go to some restaurant and get, some food. It doesn't cross my mind. I'm like, I'm going to make a better meal than that. So that is my number one thing that you slowly chip away at and like change each day is, and if you learn to cook, if you learn to enjoy these delicious foods, right? The foods we've been talking about are amazing. We're talking about steak and eggs, and avocado. You make some guacamole, you get some eggs. I mean, this is delicious. So that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. We had a chef on the podcast some time ago, and he said that the best food processing that you can ever do, and the most processed food you should eat, is the food that's been processed at the end of your chef's knife. And I said, I love that definition. That's beautiful. Well, Brian, thank you so much for coming on. Brian Sanders on Instagram, Food Lies. We've had a great conversation tonight, and hope that our listeners have taken a lot from us. Brian, what is the best way for people to connect with you? I know we referenced the website earlier, but we probably should give that again to make sure that people are supporting you. How do you want people to connect with you and continue to support the great work that you're doing?
Yeah, it's foodlies.org. You can go to sapien.org. It kind of links out to everything. It links out to Nose to Tail. You just search Food Lies on any platform and you'll just find me. YouTube, you can find the Game Changers Debunked film you mentioned. We made a film as long as the Game Changers film itself. It was like an hour and 35 minutes or something. And we had some fun with it. Sean Baker wanted to do skits, so we ended up throwing some skits in there. But there's a version without hilarious. If people don't want, some people are complaining. They're like, why are you mocking people? And I don't know. We had some fun with it. Like they're being stupid. So, they had a whole, this is supposed to be a professional film, and they're talking about boners and like nighttime, like eating a vegan burrito and getting a bigger boner or something. It was ridiculous. So we had to
it really was. Yeah.
So yeah, Food Lies, just search for Food Lies. I'm there. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube.
Very cool. Well, you're doing great work. We hope you keep it up because, man, I'm a big fan of the content that you're putting out there, and I can't wait for the series to come out, and hopefully we'll see it on Netflix soon. So once again, thanks for coming on. And hey, to our listeners, remember that it does take time and consistency to evolve, but first you have to disrupt. And now it's time to get out there and evolve.
Thank you for listening to the Evolve Podcast. If you like this episode, share it with your friends. Follow us on Instagram at Evolve_cast and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcasting app. And now it's time for you to get out there and evolve.